Theater is out for an option to host Top 100. They have canceled all events through the summer. And I didn't know anything about that. And I don't think the council members, any of them, knew anything about it.
Well, we have canceled events there, so that's accurate. But he just probably called up to the front counter and asked. He didn't call up the food chain.
Could be. I don't know. I
Yeah.
haven't talked to Jason. I just got a message from Man Castor, who's on the board for the Top 100.
Well, if you recall, the top 100 last year, at least at the high school, they did it on all video.
I didn't think they did. I thought that they just cut down on the number and spaced them out. Wasn't that the way it was done?
I don't know. I wasn't. I was there to do the videoing.
Oh,
They
that's right. There were videos. You're right.
They did a video. So
that's right. You did one for our, let's see, for Rotary, and Shelley Davis did one for Women in Business. That's right.
right.
I forgot that. Well, anyway, I guess they've rescheduled it. It's now going to be in the big gym, the new gym. But I was curious as to, is it a policy of the city? Because the council doesn't know anything about it. So what is the policy?
We're not accepting any reservations right now until things straighten out in terms of the COVID stuff.
And that's because why? Because of the governor's executive order?
Because of all of the distancing requirements and so on.
6 feet. But yeah,
Well,
6
and
feet.
there's some internal
Have to
stuff
be
as
more
well.
than that. Is there a limit on the number of people?
In the community center that can be there. That would be based more on the public health guidelines at this point, because obviously the room isn't a problem.
No, it's a big room. Yeah.
Right. And then we would have to have an employee there.
Right.
So that's kind of where we are at this point. I mean, I'm sure that'll change here sometime soon.
Well,
but
I'm
right now,
hoping it does change, but I was surprised to hear that we have a policy that we're canceling all events.
Yeah, we talked
at
about
the
it.
community theater. I don't recall that.
I know, but
Does
we did.
anybody recall that? I didn't hear it.
No. Nope.
Okay.
I think maybe the staff talked about it.
Yeah, I don't recall any of that.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I would remember that.
Yep, me too. That's for sure.
Well, we'll talk about this now, but then we'll have to put it on a future agenda. I think it's something we need to discuss.
For sure. We don't want to put that off. Need to find out some more information on that.
Or we can add that. That would be up in my staff on the existing policies, but we can bring that up and then come up with some strategies for future reservations.
Okay.
When we want to open that up. So we can try to add that at least by March 2nd, if that'd work, or do you want it at the next meeting?
Yeah, the next meeting.
At the next meeting, all right.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, it's up to you, but I think the sooner the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll have a late add, Arthur, on the agenda.
Okay, we got a bunch of upset people right now, constituents, so.
I'm sure. Okay. Okay, are we ready to start then for now? Okay.
We do have a special guest this evening, and I'm gonna turn it over to Matt, or Dwayne, if you wanna turn it over, the workshop over to Mr. Bray.
Yes, absolutely. Let's get it going. Matt?
All right. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Good evening. Yeah, so we've spoken over the past few years about a lot about stormwater and a lot about the MS4 permit that we operate under and how that's affected our development projects across town. And you've heard me speak quite a few times about how we're performing all of this stormwater cleaning in the field and holding these regulations of the state permit. And those are being borne on the shoulder of the general fund. And so over the years, Retta and I have mentioned quite a few times that the answer to that would be moving on towards a utility and making a stormwater just like water or sewer, to where it's its own funded entity as a coming from the rates, from a ratepayer standpoint. So tonight we have Jason Drew from NCE. We've worked with Jason for a number of years now, getting us toward that compliancy portion of the stormwater regulations. And so we'd asked Jason to call in tonight, and I'm not sure right here if I see him. But I was gonna, okay.
Yep,
I'm
I'm here,
gonna
Matt.
hand it off to him when he was ready. How you doing, Jason?
Good, how are you?
Good. Yeah, so just gonna little lead in for you and let you go for it.
Sounds good. Well, good evening, everyone. As Matt mentioned, we have been supporting the city on.
Excuse me, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, can I make a point of order? I don't believe that we had formal public comment, which comes prior to the presentation, prior to the Matt and Mr. Drew.
Yes, you're right. Thank you, Paul. You're right. We need to bring that forth. I'm sorry about that, public.
Sorry about that, Jason and Matt.
Yes.
Wait a minute, is that true even with a workshop? Because this is not
Yes.
a regular
It was on
council
the,
meeting?
it was on the agenda.
Right.
Unfortunately, I can't bring my agenda up for some reason. I'm having a heck of a time, so sorry about that. But yes, we need to absolutely open it up for public comment first. Sorry about that, Jason. Is there any member of the public that wants to make a comment before we get started? You see anything, Arthur?
No. As a reminder, if you are on the phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. If you are on the Zoom call, then you can digitally raise your hand to be recognized to speak. Mr. Mayor, seeing no public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Sorry about that, Jason. I missed my protocol on that one. Sorry.
No problem.
Could we, I'm sorry, could we ask Arthur or Steve, somebody to forward us the agenda? I can't find it either.
I can handle that.
Okay, thank you. There you go.
The agenda's it's on the invitation that Arthur sent out.
Yeah, it's there.
So
Well, now we got it two ways.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Jason, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Well, good evening, everyone. As I started to mention earlier, my name is Jason Drew. I'm a principal with NCE, and I've been working with Matt and the team at the city over the last couple of years on a variety of storm drain system and stormwater related items. And Retta and Matt had asked me to join you tonight to kind of talk through some of the questions that have come up and give you just some perspective of the work that we've done with the city, as well as the work that we've done with other cities and counties across Northern California. And before I jump into it, I'd just like to say, I think it's better if this is more of a discussion. So if I touch on something that you have a question about, feel free to ask a question at that time, and we can do our best to address those questions as we're going through it. Overall, one of the things that was emphasized to me for tonight was really the ability to kind of share what's been happening at the city over the last couple of years, address some of the challenges that the city is facing, and then get to this issue that Matt brought up in terms of how does the city go about funding the storm drain system needs that you have, as well as the stormwater compliance needs that you have. And just as an overview and kind of an entrance is that whether it's flood control or storm drainage or stormwater compliance, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDS compliance, and MS4, and the MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, MS4. Those three terms get sort of interchangeably used and can often sometimes cause confusion, but they're all kind of one and the same. They're all just related to a permit from the state that's related to stormwater that has a variety of compliance requirements associated with it. But cities and counties across the state, a number of the clients we're working with, they are dealing with the same challenges that you're facing. And one of the things that's become very obvious over the years is that, particularly small and rural communities like the city of Yreka face sort of extra challenges when it comes to storm drain systems and stormwater compliance, because you often have much of the same infrastructure, you have all of the same permit requirements, but you have neither the population nor the resources to address the needs that exist. So it is a real issue. Many rural counties and cities and towns across Northern California and across the state face the same issue. So I just want to emphasize that you're not alone. The conversations you've been having over the last couple of years are excellent ones to be having. The frustration is real, and it's felt by many of your neighbor counties and towns and cities. And I'm sure many of you have had those conversations. Some of the issues that really are forefront here and now are things like flooding and ponding throughout the city, inadequate or missing drainage facilities, the need for significant capital replacements. Many towns and cities and counties are facing that. The MS4 or stormwater permit requirements, and all of that with regards to limited resources. So there's a lot of funding constraints. And then you throw on top of that, the state continues to add statewide requirements like the trash provisions, like total maximum daily loads, and a variety of other things. It just sort of feels like you're already drowning and someone's handing you a brick. So the reality is that, as you know, and Matt and Yreka have talked with you over the years, the city has numerous needs and requirements related to your storm drain system and your stormwater program or your MS4 program. And we've really talked about them in sort of 5 areas. One being capital. So all those infrastructure needs that either exist now or are needed in the future. Operations and maintenance, which is critically important and is often forgot about. Asset management, we'll talk more about. Regulatory or permit compliance, and then program implementation and coordination, the real staff and financial resources it takes to actually operate and maintain a storm drain system or to implement permit compliance. Over the last couple of years, there's been a number of efforts that the city has taken on to address some of these needs. And you may be familiar with several of these. The first one is the asset management program. So getting everything in the cartograph system. That program development has occurred here in the last 2 years. This last year, one of the big things that happened is the city received a letter from the Regional Water Quality Control Board saying, just to let you know, in 30 days, we want to show up and have a program review meeting with you about your stormwater or your MS4 program.
Right.
So we kind of had to drop everything, prepare for that meeting, which for all the council members, your staff hit it out of the park. They did a great job preparing. I think that the regional board staff were surprised at how prepared your team was. And it took several months, but they sent the city a letter with a variety of things that they wanted more information on or to follow up on compliance items. And so we spent most of last year working on responding to those requests. And then the last piece is 2 years ago, we helped the city put the trash compliance plan together, which was the first requirement under the statewide trash provisions. So those are just some of the things that we've been working on over the last 2 or 3 years. But as you know, and as Matt's probably shared with you, there's a significant amount of work that remains. And the bottom line is identifying a secure and stable and dedicated revenue source to support those efforts is really critical. And we're in discussions with about 6 to 10 communities that are in the same position that you're in, and they're deciding how they're going to try and fund their needs. And so the timing of this discussion is good. So I'll just stop there for a moment and see if there's any questions before I move on. Okay. So one of the things that Arthur and Matt and Retta and I have talked about is, okay, knowing that these needs exist and knowing that some form of dedicated revenue is needed, how do you get there? That's really the fundamental question, is how do you get there? So Arthur, I don't know if you can pull up the figure that I sent you earlier.
Yes, I've also made you a co-host, Jason, so you can share your screen with any materials that you may have.
Okay, I just have that one slide, and it may be easier if you just want to pull that up.
Sure, let me find that real quick here.
So while Arthur's pulling that up, I'm just going to kind of walk through basically a sequential set of topics that will help sort of lay the foundation for what the next steps look like. Because that's really what it comes down to, is how do we start, walking so that we can run, so that we can get to the end result that the city is looking for. A lot of what I'm about to share with you is very basic, and it will come across as very basic, but after working on stormwater and stormwater funding for almost 20 years, I can tell you it's amazing how many times the simple things get missed. So the first and most important step in consolidating a program and getting a plan together for how you're going to fund a storm drain system or a stormwater program is you have to really understand the critical details of your financial need. So how much money do you need on an annual basis, on a permit basis, or over a 10 or 20-year planning horizon? And that need typically comes from 4 primary areas. The first is capital infrastructure needs. So what are all the tangible on the ground things that we need in our storm drain system to function to the level that the city is looking for? The second area is operations and maintenance. And again, that often, it's often a very significant need, but is often not given the attention that it needs from a financial perspective. And I will say that it's often very difficult for regulatory agencies to understand when they say, well, you just need to maintain these facilities, that they don't really understand what that means and how much staff and financial resources it takes to do that. So operations and maintenance is the second area and is really important. The third area is regulatory or permit compliance, so that MS4 program. And then the fourth area is program administration and management needs. So the real time and staff resources it takes to oversee and implement a program. So I want to talk a little bit about each of those areas, and then I'll walk you through this sequential process. From a capital perspective, what we need to be able to do is update the city's master plan of drainage. That existing master plan of drainage is now, I think, over 15 years old, so it's starting to become quite dated. So we need to update the master plan of drainage so that we can identify the specific capital needs that the city has over the next 10 or 20 or even 25-year planning horizon. That's really critical because that gets us the first of the 4 areas I just talked about. It gets us what the capital costs will be. In parallel, we need to formalize the operations and maintenance program and have a clear plan related to operations and maintenance for the storm drain system and all the things associated with your MS4 program. So we need to define the specific human or equipment or technology needs and that can include, the technology needs can include what's all associated with your asset management program, the tracking and reporting that's required, those kinds of costs. So putting that whole formal operations and maintenance program and plan together so that we have clear annual and long-term costs identified. Then from a regulatory compliance perspective, to get those costs, one of the things we need to do is complete the internal program audit. So one of the things we started a couple of years ago and almost immediately got put on hold to shift to focus on the trash compliance plan and responding to the water board's request for a program review is completing the internal program audit. And what that really means is looking at your existing program and saying, you have an existing MS4 permit. It has a whole variety of requirements within it. Looking at what your program, the extent of your program is, what you've implemented, and comparing those two to say, here's the things we've completed, here's the things we're working on, and here's the things we have yet to start. And I say all of that with a little caveat that these MS4 permits, they come in 5-year increments. And the current permit actually expired about a year ago. And that permit, the way these permits are written is, those permits are basically in continuation until the next permit is adopted. We hope to see a draft of the new permit sometimes towards the middle of this year, and it will probably go into effect either in January or July of 2022. That permit is going to look similar to, but not the same as the existing permit. There will be some new requirements in the permit. And so we want to perform this program audit by looking not only at how does the city's program stack up to the existing permit, but knowing some of the things that are likely to be in the next permit, we want to be thinking about those so that we can plan for them and understand what their costs might be, what the cost implications are, whether that's in staff time, vendor time, real money time, so that we have clear costs for that stormwater program implementation. Once we do that, then we can look at what the program administration and management and coordination costs are. So identifying those specific human and other costs that are associated with just managing a storm drain system and managing an MS4 program. Once we have all of those, then we can pull them all together and create what we're calling a stormwater master plan. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with traditional storm drain master plans. They've been around for quite some time. They typically only focused on the storm drain system and often only the main lines within a storm drain system, and really only focused on the capital. That's kind of what traditional, whether it's master plans of drainage or storm drainage master plans, look at. At the same time, some communities have had operations and maintenance plans, and others have had stormwater management plans for the regulatory side. That gets very cumbersome for especially smaller communities to try and manage. So we've really worked with our clients to transition to having a single plan that's easier to manage and implement, that combines the traditional storm drain master plans, that is the capital element, the O&M plan, which guides all of the operations and maintenance of the system and ancillary aspects, and the regulatory plan, which is often the stormwater management plan, pulling those together in a single plan. So it's really clear what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, who's responsible for it, and how much it's going to cost. And when you have that and you have selected your planning horizon, you can then start to decide what the best funding initiative looks like, whether that's a property related fee or a special tax or some kind of assessment. There are a variety of options. And then you can move forward with that initiative, knowing what your costs are, and then be able to put a system together and a program together to fund that. So moving forward at this point, the highest priority is we need to update the master plan of drainage so that we get our arms around the capital element. Once we do that, or in parallel, we can start to formalize the operations and maintenance plan. Once those two things are done, or in parallel, we can complete the program audit. Once we have all of those three things done, we can then create a single consolidated stormwater master plan that's easier to manage and implement. That will give you the details of what needs to be done and the costs. At that point, you can make a decision about whether or not you want to move forward with a revenue initiative, and you have clear justification and defensibility for moving forward with that stormwater master plan. And then you can move forward with your revenue initiative if you choose to do that. Once that's in place, you can then implement your plan. So Matt, I would just ask if based on the conversations, or Retta, if there's anything I've missed given what we've talked about.
Not from my side, Jason.
No, I appreciate that because there's a lot of pieces that get us to that comprehensive plan, if I can use that word. And like you say, that lays the groundwork of where this might be with the, I say fairly recent, I believe that legislation, correct me if I'm wrong, was 2017 that provided where it defined stormwater utilities, property related fees. And basically moving towards that as a possible revenue initiative to fund this infrastructure.
I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there's discussion items, I'm certainly here and happy to share whatever knowledge I have.
This is Councilmember Baird. I do have a couple questions, and my computer does go in and out. So if I get dropped again, then I will call back. But I read through the paperwork and I pulled what we had reviewed back in 2017, and I do have a few general questions. So of what you're proposing for becoming compliant with what the state is requiring, were we able to accomplish any of that in the last 3 years since we approved Tract 1? Hello?
Matt, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can take that. So as you saw in the paperwork there, Debbie, there's multiple areas of compliancy. And as the 5-year permit went on, we kept ticking the boxes and checking the boxes. As Jason stated, we're awaiting this new permit so we can make sure we're compliant with all of it also. So as of right now, and with the audit that the water boards, when they sprung the audit on us this past year, they walked out of the room and we felt very, very well about the work that we had done and where we had reached in compliancy. I don't recall, maybe Jason does, if there were any glaringly obvious misses, but I don't recall any of that. When the gentleman, I think we spent the better part of a day going through all of that with him, and we are on track. The big elephant in the room is the trash. There's some work there that needs to be dove back into and figure out how much we want to fund it. On the trash compliancy side of things for the capture devices, that's as simple as buying mesh nets and hanging them off the end of the pipe that goes into the creek, all the way up to $500,000 plus hydrodynamic separators. So that's probably one of the next ones that will be leaning on and working the most to be compliant with on that, Debbie. That one's going to cost some money, some more time for sure.
So Matt, when are we going to get presented those different options for that?
I don't have a particular time frame for that one, Mr. Mayor, but if you'd like, we can try to fast track that in. Obviously, I and the team, we've not been looking at the $500,000 plus options because it's general fund. And that comes back to this discussion tonight about how would we fund the multiple moving pieces of this. That is a pretty set in stone item there. And I've had some talks with the water boards, some one-on-ones with Brandon, our contact there at the water board that audited us. And, just speaking to him about this trash compliancy portion of it versus the transient and homeless generated trash that's sizably more noticeable when you go out there and get in the creek and walk around under the bridges and that. So we're, on one end with the regulatory side with the water boards, we're looking at catching cigarette butts. And then we're out there with the police department pulling out shopping carts and couches and whatever else gets thrown in the creek, So I'd like to say that there could be a balance. It's kind of tough to swallow, but some kind of logic to come out of the water boards to say, look, this is what we're focused on as a city of 7,500 people, and where we see our trash right now is primarily from the transient and homeless population. It's not necessarily dirty outfalls that we had to go through and map that as part of this regulatory update, where we know which outfalls are ours, which outfalls are Caltrans, which ones are shared, which ones are trash generating, which ones aren't. And there's some swapping around back and forth in the regulations on that kind of thing to meet compliance. But yeah, the next step on that is to decide if we just want to try to, like I say, there's simple things like nets that we can hang on there to become compliant, and then all the way up to these big, large hydrodynamic separators that just do it and we clean it out every 3 or 4 months. But I feel good about where the city is with our compliancy across the board right now. Water board they're not on the horn with us, banging on us. And, I think they understand. And as Jason spoke to earlier, that they came up to this little city of Yreka and we had our guns drawn. We were ready and we had the facts that they were looking for. So we got a quick little cut sheet there. Back to your question, Debbie, there was just a quick little cut sheet and we started working on those with Jason and his team and my team up here. So I still feel very good about where we are with the compliancy status.
Thank you.
Does anybody else on the council have some questions for Jason or for Matt?
I don't at this time, no.
I know this is something that's required by the state. We've been talking about this for a number of years. It looks like we're moving along pretty well. It looks like on the information that we got, it's costing us right under $60,000 for this plan. Is that correct, Matt? 58,000.
And yes, and it's a small piece of the puzzle that is the stormwater compliancy that, like, as I spoke to earlier, is being shouldered by the general fund right now. So it's either we're spending our general fund money on this type of planning effort and compliancy requirements versus, funding our parks or our streets or our police department. So it's taking the big chunks out of that same pot of money that is the general fund.
Right.
And really I think the large discussion here that I know Retta wanted us to speak to tonight is just so we can all get on the same page about what the diff is, what it looks like, what, the different ways to fund this. As I mentioned earlier, as a utility, it's a large push to get there. And this stormwater master plan is designed in such a manner to answer these questions. So to make it a little simpler for council to shoulder and make that hard decision down the road here on how we're going to fund it with whether revenue initiative or and it comes down to you make your utility bill payment every year. It's, people call it our water bill, but it's not. It's the water bill, the sewer bill. It's Measure H for the fire department. It's the landfill fee from when the county took over the landfill. I think that's the discussion that I'd like to get out there in the open, is that from a public works standpoint, and as your director, a utility makes the best sense to me because it's set. We know it's coming. We can budget around it. And then that's another, not a feather in our cap, but it's another paragraph to write down when we're answering these audit questions from the water boards is, how they ask these pointed questions about how do you plan on meeting this requirement in the coming year? You say, well, we can budget for that because we have a budget for that. As of right now, we're just out there winging it on the general fund.
Yeah, and Matt, just to add to that, so what's in your packet right now, what Retta and Matt shared with me is how do we take digestible bites to move us towards and through the sequence. And so our first focus is this update of the master plan of drainage. That's what's in your packet right now, is let's get this done first. And then once we get that done, then we can work on the O&M plan and completing the program audit. But the priority right now was to do the update to the master plan of drainage. So that's what's specifically outlined in your packet.
So to clarify for the council, each one of these packets will have their individual program cost. And what we're looking at is at least continue moving forward on updating the MPOD in the chart. Does that make sense?
Say that again, Greta.
So the proposal, Joan, as you called out, it's about 60,000 plus or minus. That would be the first in the staircase of steps. That would be just step one. So that's not the whole piece of the pie. There's the comprehensive cost of each of these steps will be greater than that. But we need to keep moving. I mean, we can't let that paralyze us. Overall, we need to keep moving forward on some of this, and at least the master plan on drainage would allow us to assess impacts to growth. And we'll kind of tie into that in the second half of this workshop.
Okay, so I guess, Mr. Mayor, that would be my question then. Where does this funding come from? Because I know that we're in a deficit budget. We're probably going to be in a deficit budget for 5 years. Retta and I have talked about this. So yes, I'm most interested to find out where the funding's going to come from for this.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like it's going to be a little tricky to come up with that funding, but I guess that's what our next part of this conversation is going to look like. Is that going to be something you're going to talk about now, Retta? Or?
Well, I think it's going to be, although it came out nice, kudos to Public Works on that stormwater. They got very little lead time to pull a comprehensive review together on that. But, you know, if we didn't do so well, guess what? We'll be paying that in fines. So do you plan or do you pay fines? And, you know, which is the worst of that. So I think it's going to take some concentrated commitment to funding. When I say that, there could be, as you know, in the Prop 1, and I don't know if there's going to be one more round of storm drainage funding out of that Prop 1, Prop 60, probably the wrong Prop 68 funding, possibly to go after. I know they did have a round of funding July of 2020, but we're in the middle of all the other fundings. But if we had had this review and the comprehensive plan, we probably would look very well and had a grant out for funding for trash capture devices or other compliance measures to the system. But you know, our last plan, is it dated 2007? Is that correct? Our last update to the plan of city stormwater drainage plan. And I believe there's been some additional studies to that. The last comprehensive capital plan I thought was 2007, Matt. You could correct me on that, Ron.
I believe you're right, Retta.
But I just wanted to find out if there was any other funding available. For a while, when the state, I mean, this is virtually an unfunded mandate by the state of California, the state and the feds. So for a while, they had grants available that would come down to the counties and the cities. So I'm just curious as to where they are with all of that grant money. Did it all go away?
There is some competitive money on Prop 1 for capital projects. For studies, there may be some planning money. I don't know about that, if that's all been exhausted. out of the Prop 1 funds.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think it's imperative that we push forward with this. I think we need to get the master plan of drainage. We need to bring it up to snuff. We're paid to figure out where the money's going to come from. I think the 5 of us as council members need to move forward. It's got to be done, whether it's an unfunded mandate or not. I mean, they do a lot of that in education too, unfunded mandates. The federal and the state tell you you're going to do this, but they say there's no money. But it's up to us to find the money, if that means within the general fund or within a raise in utilities, as Public Works Director Bray talked about. I think this is something that needs to be agendized. It needs to be agendized over and over again until we can get it done. And we need to work on it. It's not going to get done in a week or 2 or 3, but we need to make it a priority, because if not, we will be fined. The state loves to come in and find things that are wrong, and they love to take our money. So we don't want them taking our money for no and not get anything out of it. So I'm going to move that we, Mr. Mayor, that we work on getting it agendized and taking a look at it fairly periodically, so we're not complacent on it,
Yes, I agree, Paul. That's something we definitely got to keep moving forward on. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but it's something we can't let lay stagnant. We need to keep up on top of this. No matter how we figure out the funding, that's going to be the next big discussion, whether it's in utilities, which I think is probably a good alternative. And what Matt Bray was saying, I think we just almost need to start planning on that right away. Actually, myself, I don't know what the rest of the council feels, but I think that's something we need to start planning right away with, having that plan B. And do it right away.
Right.
So-
And I don't think we can make a motion tonight. This is just a workshop.
No, we can't make a motion. No.
But
We-
let's get it put on the next agenda.
Exactly. That's our next thing, is just to put it on his next agenda or next 1 week as soon as we can to move forward with it. This is just, like you said, this is just a workshop, so we can't make any motions on that, but we can give direction. So that would be, sounds like, as long as it's the council's direction, I would agree. Let's move forward with that. That would be our next action item to move forward with. So unless there's any other protests by the rest of the council, I'd say let's move forward.
I think we'll have it ready for the next agenda.
Oh, great. Wow. Thank you. That's
Where we have any choice, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to move forward and not, be out of sight, out of mind, because we need to not ignore it and move on with the issue.
And we don't want to get fined. I
No,
mean,
not at all.
that would add to the unfunded mandate. So we don't want to go there.
yeah. We don't need to have that problem on top of it. That's for sure.
And they do that. Wasn't
Oh,
it the city of Etna that got fined $19,000 for not complying with some kind of a water project? Matt, you know more about that than I do, but it just kind of, there was a letter from the state saying do this or else. They didn't do it. And the little tiny town of Etna was fined $19,000 that they didn't have from the state.
Can somebody mute their screen so that we're not listening to everybody's stuff go off, please? Please mute your screen unless you're talking.
I think we got it quiet now. We'll see. There we go. All righty. Are we ready to, what's the next topic we need to talk about? Is that on you, Retta, or who's talking about that one?
We're going to talk a little bit, take this opportunity to move a little bit into development impact fees. And but before I kind of move into that, the state of California legislature did pass a Senate bill that allows cities to consider stormwater drainage as a property-related fee. And the cities have the ability to form utilities for these for the stormwater system. It's relatively new law, but to answer that, that's why kind of the state saying that cities have the ability to raise revenues And that's in part why it's not an unfunded mandate. And of course, as expected, court cases are coming down where some of these improvements are being questioned as that there is a direct property benefit nexus. And that's kind of all coming down. But so I think if we just kind of do these measured steps along the way, we'll be ready when the opportunity comes and the courts kind of figure out how the landscape looks, that we'll be ready to seize the opportunity to possibly move forward with the stormwater utility in the future. So it's not a short, it's just going to take a while, but at least we'll be a little ahead of the curve, I hope.
Yeah.
And with that, and would you say that's accurate statement, Drew? Or Jason, excuse me.
Yeah, it's when you get into the methods that are available to the city to raise local revenue for storm drain or stormwater related items, it gets complicated. There are a variety of options. All of them have benefits and drawbacks associated with them. And I think as you move forward and you get to the point where you understand what your costs are and what your needs are financially, then you can start to evaluate whether you want to pursue a tax, a fee, a property related fee, an assessment, if you want to put a formal utility together. There are a variety of means of raising that revenue. And like I said, they all come with different benefits and drawbacks. Right now, the main challenge on the stormwater side that most cities and counties and special districts face is that Proposition 218 set some very clear standards for water and sewer. And that language was very vague about how stormwater fit into Proposition 218. And that's been litigated now for 25 years. And what Retta was speaking to is just a few years ago, SB 231 was passed. It was an administrative or legislative attempt to clarify Proposition 218 as it relates to stormwater. And it basically attempted to clarify that stormwater could be treated similarly as water or sewer as a utility. The main challenge is no one's moved forward with executing a Prop 218 related utility under SB 231 because the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association has made it very clear that whoever goes first is going to get sued. And so there are a handful of cities and counties across the state that have been considering moving forward. And actually, my understanding is the League of Cities has started a subcommittee to look specifically at, maybe supporting financially whoever goes first, because we know that they're going to end up in litigation. So that's still all in discussion. It doesn't preclude other options like property related fees, special assessments, special taxes that are all acceptable under Prop 218, but those all have to go to either vote of property owners or vote of the registered voters.
So Jason, just by what you're saying there with property owners, assessments and taxation and stuff like that, is a city like us, a small city of Yreka, is there any advice that you would say the best direction for us to go?
It's a great question. It's hard to give you a direct answer given where we are right now, because one of the things that often drives what revenue initiative you want to pursue is how much money you need. Right. If you need $500,000 a year, that's very different than if you need $2.5 million a year. Sure. So, and the kind of revenue you can raise from those. I will say, having worked on stormwater and storm drain related finance projects over the last decade, 95% of the time, cities and counties right now, as it's written, under Proposition 218 pursue property related fees, because typically the nexus is clear, and it requires a property related fee requires that you get 50% plus one of the property owners who respond to the initiative. That's the threshold for it to be approved, versus a special tax or a general tax or a special assessment. If it has to go to the registered voters, you need a supermajority, and getting 66.6+% is often very challenging.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Does the council have any more questions on that? Nobody? Okay. So Retta, do you have anything more you want to add, or where else we need to go with this?
There we go. We're gonna jump a little bit into, if you're ready, into development impact fees
Yes.
for this. Okay, great. And I can either pull up my PowerPoint here and we can go. And some of you have received this directly. So if you want to, I can either share screen, or I could just kind of talk through this. I'll probably read the PowerPoint for those who may not have the visual access to the screen view. But what we wanted to bring up were what I call development fees redo, or development fees revisited. And again, back in 2007, the city implemented an ordinance, and had all these master plans were updated, and we kind of went and developed, tried to capture the part of our infrastructure that was related to growth, or what were the impacts related to growth. And when we did those impacts related to growth, we looked at both the infrastructure, city facilities, parks and recreation. And at that time, we're having some large development in the city. As a lot of you know, the apartment complexes on Foothill Avenue, several came in all at once in about 2004 to 2006. And the city felt like, wow, we're giving away capacity for no charge. And so we kind of took all the information of the master plans that we had and developed a development impacts fee structure, and went through all the public meetings and implemented it. But at the time, it was kind of like going 100% for the fees needed, or what the studies identified, was a bit of a road too far, because we kind of went from 0 to 100. Mm-hmm. And that was a little bit too much, too far to go. And so the methodology of what we adopted on fees was to stair step kind of into these fees, and kind of we just implemented the fees at 25% of what the full cost of the impacts from development were. And then the next step ladder we had in place was to take them up to 50%. And about that time, the economy also wasn't really growing that well, and we took kind of a, and then in 2009, as everybody knows, we took the big economic downturn, and kind of every time we came back to revisit development impact fees, it's like, the economy's not so good. But what I'm going to kind of walk you through is the economy actually, from the development side, a lot of development really happened. And I sent to you all a spreadsheet, and I don't know if you received it. I was a little late in the day in getting that out. But when you look at that spreadsheet, you can see that actually a lot did happen in that time. And in fact, we had within the city 65 of a combination of 5 institutional new structures. We had 28 residential structures and 32 commercial structures. And by keeping the fees at this, I call it subsidized or discounted rate, we left 1.3 million on the table into what we would have normally collected had we brought the fees up to 100%. In actually codifying the development impact fees, it is actually in our code that we revisit this every 6 months to see if we should raise the rates. And, you know, I feel I've been a little bit negligent in bringing this up every 6 months, but guess what? Here I am. And you'll hear from me probably from now on every 6 months till we can come up with a plan of how we want to address the impacts from development. So I'm going to kind of jump, that's kind of the high level from. So I was going to kind of go past really fast how development fees, why they're good for the community. But basically, it's kind of divvying up the equity of who should pay for this taking up capacity and who pays when you have to increase your capacity with new infrastructure, new facilities. And if you don't collect it at all, then, you know, when you get up to 85% capacity and you get to that tipping point of now you need, you know, Matt comes and says, hey guys, we need $15 million of improvements at our wastewater treatment plant, you know, who should pay, you know, and why didn't you collect it all along? And so it's really, you know, kind of a discussion of what's equitable and who pays for growth. Development impact fees, you know, support the growth of business. They support the growth of housing to support business. They support infrastructure and services and facilities. So with that, and, you know, kind of why Yreka doesn't really grow, but if you look at our census from 1980, we were 5,900. 2010, we were 7,700. 2020, we're probably still flat. I don't know when we see the census where we're at on population for that. We talked about that basically we've had we had the full freight or the full fee on development, we would have pulled in about 2.4 million of new revenue. We did actually pull in at the discounted rate about 1.1 million. With that, a lot of when commercial properties come in, they expect development impact fees, and their decision to locate in Yreka isn't really, you know, whether or not, you know, our fee is $10,000 or $12,000 or $5,000. I'm going to use the recent example, Dollar General. I mean, Matt told them they have MS4 requirements. It's like, yep. They're like, here's our development fee. And they're like, yep. You know, it's kind of an expectation of corporate or new businesses coming in that cities do charge these rates on there. Development fees become one of those building blocks of revenue sources. So along with utility rates, you would have development fees. In the general fund, for facilities, for the police building, you know, again, development fees to augment those new improvements, development fees that are related to growth for the new fire building.
So, Red, I got a question on those development impact fees. Like you said, we've actually thrown away some money that we could have actually got on some of these developments. You know, like you're saying, Dollar General, Tractor Supply, some of these big names. Is as far as development like that, is there any way that impact fees, is there any way that we could talk about those in the future, about how we could look at separating the two? So say we don't want to discourage a small business that could just barely survive coming in, but we know a big box brand store of some sort coming in. I mean, how could that look for our future? How can we separate the two to where we don't discourage small business, but we still encourage, big business to come in here too? How does that look?
I don't know quite how you would carve that on, it's more by kind of commercial or residential, but I'm not really sure how you would carve that. I mean, I guess if they're smaller, they're probably going to rent an existing space or maybe buy a space versus coming in. A lot of these, and Matt's worked with them more when these commercial chains come in, their store is going to look a certain way. They're going to lay out that store a certain way. That's going to represent that that look and feel of that corporate chain or identity on there. So they're going to come in and probably build versus remodel.
Right. I guess the reason why I asked that is right now I know of a business that is going to be developing here in Yreka. And it's going to be a small business, and there's a handful of people that are going to be running this business, but it is going to be a new build. And that's the thing I look at is I'm a little nervous on these impact fees. I want to see these impact fees, but I don't want to see it discourage some of these local guys trying to open up a business and building a new, a whole new building and everything. That's what's going to be happening here shortly. And I know of this one, it's a small business, but they're going to be building a new building and stuff. And I don't want to discourage people like that from starting something new.
So the ordinance does give you discretion in kind of dealing with special cases. As you recall on the tribal Rain Rock Casino development, there were we waived the installation or the repayment of their development fees for 5 years after they opened, so that they could have that cash flow from operations to pay it back. I mean, there was a nominal financing charge for that. We've also done installment payments with a local church that wanted to build an addition to their facility. And again, that was done. And we've done some waivers on those where I think we didn't do waiver, excuse me. We augmented on a recent nonprofit that's trying to build and gave them a credit against some donated funds. So I think those compelling cases council has some flexibility to evaluate that.
Good. Because I think it'd be crucial on some of these, small startup businesses that may have a huge impact for our city, especially, because there's some definitely some new ideas coming around, and hopefully we'll start seeing those being active here shortly. That would be great. Now, in conjunction to that, Retta, if it's does it go through? Who all does it go through before we see it as a city council? I just want to make sure that everybody knows that on something like that. Decision making, is it step down through the planning department and then go to the planning commission, then us ultimately, or can we skip through some of that?
I'm not sure I'm following your question all the way.
So I know that nonprofit.
Dwayne?
If I may, Dwayne, it came through the finance committee, right?
Yeah, it came through the finance committee. It's already on the books. It's just that council in the past has made the decision that we would only take half of it. And again, the dilemma that the finance committee sees is that basically what we're doing with these new businesses that are coming in or people building a new house is we're saying, you know what, we're going to go ahead and subsidize you. We don't need your money. Well, we need their money. We need it our responsibility is to this city and to the citizens of this city to make sure that we keep the infrastructure up. we are probably one of the few places in the state of California where even with these fees, it is cheaper to build here a home. I'm just going to talk about a single family home. It's cheaper to build a single family home with the fees here. Whereas if you go to Reading or South, you're going to see most people are going to buy, unless it's a developer that's putting in 100 or 200 homes, most people are going to buy a home and they're going to remodel it. And again, in that response, when I was down in San Diego on Thanksgiving, the neighbor to my brother had just remodeled, added 1,000 square feet, and to his 1,200 square feet, it was $30,000 in fees to the city. He did that rather than do new construction, because new construction would have been more like $40,000 in fees. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon us to bring this back at a meeting. I think it's incumbent upon us to phase this in tiers. And I hear what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, regarding new business, but I don't want to be the one to play God over which business gets, which business gets a break and which doesn't. Every business that has come into new business, that's come into Yreka, has been basically a corporate that's built. Anybody, and they're ready to pay the fees. They're not going to complain because they do it all over the US. But as far as houses, we've had, I think, maybe 5 homes built in the last 5 years. And looking at the addresses of the homes, they were pretty high end. So if you're spending 300, 400, 500,000 on a home, I don't think an extra $7,000 worries you too much. And businesses, you and I are both business, and Debbie, there's no way I could have built. I mean, I would have had to have $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 to build this size store I needed. So I just rented a current. And I think that's, aside from the one you're talking about, I think that's kind of what we're looking at. If you look at the number of businesses that are locally owned that have been built, where they built a building in Yreka, I don't know that you can find one in the last 10 years.
There's a couple.
that-
We got like the Jefferson Roadhouse was marginal in that 10 years you're talking about. I think that was about 10 years.
But remember, that was a remodel. That wasn't a new build. That was a remodel. I think Richard Olszynski's building and John Richter's building might be the last, new one. And then also know that if I don't know who owns that, but when you're in that kind of a situation, like where Rayleigh's is, or like where everybody is at the north end of the town, with that strip mall, when you're in that sort of a thing, you pay a percentage, not only your rent, but a percentage of the gross to the owner of the building or the manager of the building. So, I'm not saying that they're used to it, but I mean, we have to look out for our city.
Oh, yeah.
And we have to be most responsible, or we just go to the city and say, hey, we're going to tax you a little more. Well, this is a much more fair way to get money in, because people build it into their budget when they're building. They know that they're going to have to pay it.
Thank you, Paul. I agree, but I think that we also need to look around, yes, to the south, to Reading, as Paul mentioned, but if you look at the other cities, all the other cities in our county, yeah, we're like the lowest rate. I mean, that's including, Weed, Mount Shasta, Dunsmuir. We're half the price. And do you remember when we first came on the council, Debbie remembers this, we completely dismissed all the fees. It was supposed to be for 1 year. I think we ended up doing it for 18 months or 2 years. And I think we had 2 people take out permits for building a home. One was an accident. He didn't know that it was, that the fees were dismissed. And the other one took out, and I think that was Tom McCullough. Anyway, pardon, McCullough?
McCullough.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, he did take out one. But anyway, the whole idea was as an incentive to get people to build, and that didn't work. And so if all the other cities are doing this, and then of course in the rest of the state, but I'm just talking about local cities that have the whole fee. And then we're the only ones that have half. And all these corporations honestly are building in the county seat mostly. And yeah, we've got $1.3 million that we waived bye-bye to in the last 13 years.
Well, this is the other way we gotta look at this too. Yeah. So I definitely agree with the impact fee. So don't get me wrong. I'm just looking at a way that we could still retain the people that want to build small homes and stuff like that and not discourage them. So I think there's ways we can definitely structure this to keep it to where it encourages new development without getting too out of control. A prime example is I want to go back to is our water rates. And I use this example quite a bit because for a long time, we didn't raise our water rates for a long time. That just kept stagnant and didn't do anything. So then when we finally had to raise our water rates because we're getting so financially burdened by not raising our water rates, well, we got so much guff from the citizens because we raised it all at once. Well, if we gradually do some of these things, then it's not such a huge impact on the community and not such a burden on them. So that's the way I look at it. As yes, I agree that we need to address these impact fees, but I also agree that we need to do it in a smaller increments on some levels, and then maybe a little bit larger increments on other levels. I guess that's what I'm kind of getting to, and I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but that's something I think we definitely need to talk about in the near future for sure.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think it needs to be incremental. However, you have to remember, water rates, utilities affected every household. This
Correct.
would have affected 5 households in the last 5 years.
Correct.
There's a big difference there. And again, builders are used to paying this. They know they're gonna pay this. So I mean, so they are a little bit different. But you either phase it in over 2, 3, 4, or 5 years and get it done. But I think you're right. We need to talk about it put it on for a further meeting, and maybe Yreka can do that for us if you ask for that, Mr. Mayor, and then we can discuss that, and maybe within a meeting or two we can come to some kind of a
Consensus.
some kind of an agreement.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree, Paul. Thank you. We definitely need to bring this back up and be consistent on and diligent on how we do this. Yreka, I know on this, I know this is something you're not going to be able to bring back like the next city council meeting, obviously, but what kind of time frame could we be looking at some of these things to start addressing it?
Well, I think we've got a baseline here. So if we could, I could bring some options, and I put those in the PowerPoint. I think there's some projects on. So I don't know if you saw on the slide what a hypothetical apartment complex based on 63 units, how that would impact us if we, Kim, who's on the line here, and I'm going to ask her to speak on also another question of yours, Dwayne. But say if it was a 63 unit apartment complex with a 4-inch meter, their impact fee should be about 600,000. If we keep it at the 50% when that app comes in, we'll only collect 300,000.
Wow.
So that's a big write-off of opportunity lost. And again, you're asking, how do we pay for these stormwater master plans? That's exactly the kind of fees that help address that. And so I call it, being smart in how we address these kind of intertwined needs, because we're getting the needs, we aren't getting the revenue from the development on that. And Kim, also, your question is, how do you find out if somebody needs some special accommodations on their development impact fees, such as a deferral or a loan or a waiver? And that usually comes into Kim. And Kim, do you want to comment on how you get noticed for that?
Okay, and can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I didn't know if I need to do the *9. Okay, well, usually if somebody, they will ask us if there's an exemption or some way that they could finance the impact fees, and that's when I would direct it to our city manager. And our ordinance does state there are exemptions. in there. I don't have it in front of me to quote that. But most of the time, I don't get that question on the impact fees. I don't think people are discouraged with our impact fees. And I could be wrong, but
Well, that's good to know.
you know, they may be telling you guys something different than me at the counter. I understand
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
We're
Right.
usually the ones that hear about it.
Yeah, yeah. I understand that. Now, I'm not sure that I really answered your question, Retta.
No, you
Well, I
did.
think
How I
Atlas,
would
you know,
address it.
how does somebody say they have a financial hardship for that? And that's usually communicated to you, and Kim would talk to Steve or
Mhm.
me, and if they want to know, well, what would financing cost?
Right, there is a provision that has been used. I don't know if it was the most recent one, but including on those houses that were relocated from the courthouse up on the hill. I'm trying to remember the guy that's rehabbing them incredibly slowly, but
Yeah,
he
Bill
did.
Schmidt. Yeah.
Bill Smith.
Yeah, Bill. But he did ask for a deferral, and there is a fee involved in that sort of thing.
Okay. A fee involved in the deferral? Is that what you just said, Steve?
Right. In other words, it costs him something to defer it. He's still responsible for paying the bill.
Right.
It's just changing when it's due. Unfortunately, in his case, he's gone beyond that, but not a big surprise.
No, that's for sure. So did we, on going back to the Dollar General, did we do any deferrals on that one or anything on that and give them some leniency, or what happened on that one? Because I thought we waived something on sidewalks or something on them, didn't we?
We didn't waive sidewalks, no.
Okay, so what?
The-
Because we didn't have them put sidewalks in, did we?
They
Just curb
They
and gutter, did
they split the lot, and so they only needed to improve the frontage of the lot. That the full piece, I forget how many acres it was that Hanley owned. When they picked that up, they cut it in half pretty much, and so they only built out that, and it fronts. You know, there's sidewalk on Main Street already, and then they had to turn the corner and move down, and they're still not quite done yet, but
Oh.
they're open.
Who will put that other sidewalk in then? The city? There's
No, that's a pretty common misnomer. The city doesn't install sidewalk, developers do.
Okay, so why did we require them to put that in next door to the store?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your question, Paul.
I thought there was one, I just went by there the other day and looked, and there's one that goes from the driveway up to the corner, but not to the back of the store, but it's to the front
Yeah,
part.
why did, I was asking why we didn't require the developer to put the sidewalk in from the east side of the driveway just to the back of the lot.
So that one with the Highway 3 frontage, there was existing Caltrans sidewalk already, and they were required to turn the corner and get out of the Caltrans right away, install a section of sidewalk that was pretty goofy, but they made it work to meet the ADA grades. And it comes down and it hits the driveway approach to the site. And so there's ADA access from the main drag to the store. And unless I'm missing something, they
Who's
built
responsible
sidewalk
for the
to the new
sidewalk?
property line.
Yeah, who's responsible for the sidewalk beside their store that didn't get put in? Are we gonna put that in, or, and because the developer didn't put any sidewalk in that runs along the south side of the store, running east to west from the east side of the apron towards Greenhorn Creek?
Okay. So I have two questions out that were posed to me today that I have been working on. So I will get into that and get you back an answer on what's going on with the Dollar General.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's what you were asking, Dwayne,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yep,
Yeah.
it was. Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, it'd be good to have some clarification on that, for sure. Righty, does, Retta, do you have anything else you want to add on this?
No, I think I've got some direction to come back with some proposals on increasing the fees. And, you know, kind of, you've kind of seen it, the last slide was kind of an aggressive approach with, or a moderate or a slow. So I'll bring a staff report with some options for that. Just know once you increase the rates, there's a lag time of 6 months before they're implemented. And we
Oh,
also
okay.
need to notice for that. So just that'll take, so it'll most likely be a March meeting when I have adequate time to notice.
Okay.
Consideration of an increase in rates. So, but I can't really tell right now if you're leaning towards a moderate approach, an aggressive approach, or something in between on that. So I'll try to get some more clarification on that.
I'm Mr. Mayor. I thought I heard you say and others that if we're looking at increasing, that maybe it would be a more moderate approach where it could be phased in. In other words, not hitting people all at once. Isn't that what you said?
That's what I would like to see
Right.
possibly, but I would, that comes down to the rest of the council too. Obviously, we all this all needs to be brought back to us so we can make that decision. So I definitely am excited about bringing this back forth and all of us making that decision and seeing where it goes on that, because it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And I think between all five of us, I think we could figure out the right way for the city for sure. So yes, thank you.
Well, then
I
maybe-
think Retta did a good job in putting together the approach. I mean, we do have to remember that no matter what we do from that meeting, it's going to be 6 months. That gives people a grace period. And then after that, whether we do it in, say, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it's something that we need to get it going before this council honestly changes, because another council, we need to somehow get the city up to snuff. We're losing money and we're not being responsible. This is money that other cities collect, and it's money that the state says that we can collect because they set the rates basically. And we're handicapping public works. We're handicapping all of our public works by not having this money so that they have money for whatever it might be, storm drain or whatever, for their master plan for the city. And it's incumbent upon us to get it going. Granted, maybe it's not 18 months. I mean, 18 months would still be 2 years.
Yeah.
36 months is still going to be 3.5 years.
Yep.
So we need to bear that in mind. And if people are looking at coming in, we want to encourage them to go ahead and get their plans in. If you have a small business, say, hey, get it in within the next 6 months, because we're going to, similar to what we're doing with the ordinance on the shopping carts.
Yep.
We don't want to hurt people, but people have to be financially responsible, for their own things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely.
It's kind of like the person who, goes and buys a car and says, well, I can't afford to buy gas. But if you can't afford to buy gas, you can't afford the car,
Exactly. No, you're right. And that's, like I said, it's something we need to move forward with on this council for sure, to where we make sure that it's implemented and we have something that's consistently going in conjunction to what the economy's doing, and what everything else is going on. And, we can't just stay stagnant and expect us as a city to be able to move forward. So we definitely have to move forward on this. Retta, have we ever checked on impact fees on, because there's been a lot in, say, weed, with all the stuff that was going on with them. They've had a number of different things that they've started, new businesses and new buildings and whatnot. How do we compare with the small town of Weed? Do you know?
Kim did some research this morning for me, and I focused on Reading, city of Shasta Lake City,
Right.
more cities more our size that are of a certain, I did not research weed. Kim, I don't even know if their website was updated for that. Kim might have the answer on that.
I don't know. I gave you the city of Mount Shasta.
Right, right. And I have
Big
that,
weed Shasta would be nice to know.
right. So, and I do have theirs in front of me.
Mhm.
Well, you know, you got to remember Mount Shasta basically dictates what kind of a facade you're going to put on your building. And some people say it takes them 3 to 7 years to get a permit, to get a building built. Hey, people are dying to build in Mount Shasta. I don't see, you know, I think what Red is looking for right now from us, fellow council members and Mayor Keg, is I think she really wants to know. It sounds like we are not, as a council, we're not wanting to be real aggressive. So what do we want her to bring back to us? Do we want to look at a like a 3-year, 2-year, 3-year plan, a 2-year, 3, 5? What do we want to look at? Remembering that as a council, we're only together for another 22 months.
Right, right.
And then we change.
I would say, you know, because as Paul said, water increase was immediate. So people saw that. People who are coming in to build a year or 6 months later, they're going to get the new sheet. So it's not like we're handing something, they're coming back, we're handing another. They're going to know that those rate increases. I don't want to sound hard. I encourage businesses, and that's what I want to see come in here. But looking at this, we've lost a lot of money.
Mhm.
And I think going forward, I mean, I hate to say this, I would look at the more aggressive approach. We can't afford to sit here 18 months, 2 years down the road and wait this out. And we're getting in trouble every day that we don't have this money. We have a lot of problems we're facing. And I'm just afraid if we don't act now, we're going to be in trouble in another year or 2 years when we're going to come up for money on these various projects that we're already facing dire problems on how we're going to find the money. So I would say, as a council member, it's up to everybody else, I would like to look at her aggressive approach.
Great. Thank you, Corey.
Uh-huh.
Debbie, how do you feel?
I'm only getting half of the conversation, so I'm not going to have any input because I don't have the information.
Okay.
My Zoom keeps going in and out. Sorry, people.
Mr. Mayor, I am going to agree with Corey. And again, because we don't want to keep people out, but when we look at homes, we're not losing homes over this. We haven't lost homes over it. We didn't gain homes over it when we had a moratorium. It'd be different if we had somebody that was building 100 or 250 homes, you know, below that Northridge subdivision like they were looking at about 12 years ago. That'd be a whole different ballgame. But we have nobody doing that. And the fact is, all businesses coming in so far, you know, you look at AutoZone, Starbucks, even the truck stop, it's all built in. I mean, I can tell you just from my personal opinion, with one project I'm involved in here, it was built in. We knew we were going to pay these, and we were somewhat surprised that we didn't pay full, honestly. Yeah. You know, when the developer came in and looked at everything, says, oh, you don't, boy, when we go to other cities, we pay, and they do a lot smaller businesses than what we are in Yreka. And they said, wow, you're lucky. So that's why I think maybe looking at an aggressive to a mid-aggressive approach rather than a 5-year or a 4-year.
Yeah, no, I don't. I agree with you on that. I'm not aggressive. I guess what I'm looking at is aggressively, we need to do something soon. Aggressively, we have to be aware of our locals and be aware to make sure that we're not discouraging locals and discouraging people to build homes or discouraging people to build a small business. So I get as far as being aggressive. I want to be aggressive too. We need to move forward with this, but we do, as far as how we do it, that's what we need to discuss. And I think that's what Retta needs to bring forth for us, what that, or whoever needs to show us what that means as far as impact fees, what that means to a business of, you know, say, like you said, Dollar General. What would that actually mean? Or versus a little business that be on the corner that somebody's going to be building, which I know of one little business that's going to be building soon. And we don't want to discourage those homegrown guys to not build in this locally. So those are the
Well,
things I have.
If
Well,
we
have a
look at our
Right.
commercial office general industrial worksheet, it shows you what they're going to be impacted. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's not a, I mean, what Retta talked about with the apartment complex is different because it's multiple units.
Right.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Retta, we're looking at a sheet here that shows $2,174 for public facilities impact sheet fees, $776 for citywide. If we're getting the full amount, that would be the full amount right there, correct?
Correct.
For a small business that opened.
Plus the
Okay.
water and sewer.
Plus
depending
water.
on their
Well, yeah,
business
I'm
size.
just saying, they're not going to change from this.
No,
No, they're going to be this. So I mean, we know what that is. Now, somebody that's put, and the thing is, to go back to that, I mean, I'm going to go back to this beat a dead horse. We've had maybe 4 or 5 homes built in 5 years. That's
Right.
not significant. If we had 50 or 100 homes, I go, yeah. But, we've got our fish to fry. The reason that businesses don't open in Yreka is not because of developer fees. It's because we don't have a labor force.
Yep.
We don't have a trained labor force. I mean, my number one complaint when I owned Sears was I couldn't get a trained labor force. I couldn't get somebody that would come in, that would show up to work the second day.
Absolutely. No, that's,
Yeah,
that's,
so I mean,
the lack of industries is one of our biggest problems here in Yreka right now. We're lacking hugely in amount of industry. Look at back in the 80s. I still keep going back to this. I grew up here back in the 70s, even earlier than that. We had so many mills going on here. We had a skilled labor force that actually made some money back then. That's what we need. We need that industry back into this area.
yeah.
So that's what we got to look at though too, is in conjunction, that's how we bring that back. If we can encourage that back in, then these impact fees won't have that great of bearing on these industries, because they can see that they can bring that industry in here, make money and go forward with it. So I agree. We need to definitely, the impact fees, we got to figure something out and soon. So I'm all willing to, take an aggressive approach to that. I just want to be more informed on all that too, because I don't have the chart in front of me right now that you have. So I would like to.
We can thank Bill Clinton for our lack of bills and the Quincy Library plan. I mean, we can go to one person, one administration, and thank them for shutting down everything they could in Pacific Northwest.
Yep.
Right.
So,
And one thing if I could add is I don't want to just feel like we're being discriminatory against big businesses because they have more money. I don't want to get out that Starbucks gets charged X amount of dollars, then the local goes and says, oh, I paid half of that. And then we're going to be in trouble because, oh, wait, you got special attention or special treatment. I don't want to see that because our town is small and people will get talking.
And there's
So
a
I don't wanna
formulary.
see-
Reddit has a formulary for that. That's
Yeah.
why a 20-unit apartment complex or a 40-unit apartment complex might cost more than just, like if you're building a home on Minor Street,
I
because
think,
there's more usage there.
and I'm gonna keep going back to Dwayne, that these small businesses can ask for deferrals and they can wrap that up in their construction financing at the end. And there's just, I think, discounting it at the front end, you can accomplish spreading that payment a lot of different ways with that business. I think when people are trying to start that big cash payment up front, if there is a hurdle, there are ways we can accommodate that business with deferrals of the payment with some implicit interest rates or stated rates, excuse me, for that. And we've done that successfully. We carry some side loans, or they can pay at the end and wrap it up in their construction financing. So they don't have that big check to write to get started. So I think there really are tools in the ordinance, and I'll call those out, that might not be so as much of a barrier as you think.
Okay, good. Well, like you said, the deferrals could be a huge thing for some of these small businesses trying to start doing the startup, that could be something beneficial for them, like you said. I like the idea of that, and we've already have that implemented, so that's great. So thank you. All
So
righty.
sounds like we'll bring you an aggressive approach and maybe one alternative.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yes,
what I heard was aggressive and maybe slightly less aggressive.
Moderate.
correct.
Okay.
Right.
So we'll bring that back. And then the small business that you're talking about that's thinking about doing their stuff, you might say that it'll save them a little bit of money, not a ton, but a little bit of money if they do it, get their plans and permits going in the next 6 months. Because there is
Yeah,
that. There is
Hurry.
that grace period.
They are. I'm pretty sure that they already have the ball rolling. They just get some final approval, so that would be good.
So there you go. I mean, then they'll get in under the current plan, and there are sometimes I don't think our fees are big enough for this, but I know I've been in other cities where when the fees go up, you get a flurry of plans the night before.
Yep,
So
exactly. So maybe we'll get a big rush of a whole bunch of plans here shortly then, huh? Is that what you're
I think you
saying?
you need to have a lot higher fees. But
And that would be good.
yeah,
That would be
Maybe it
great.
might push them over to make the right decision.
Exactly.
understand.
Kind of prod them into making their decision faster, huh?
Yeah, I like it.
All righty. Well, anything else do we want to add? Steve, Retta, or anybody?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay. Well, then we know we got direction on that, and I don't think there's anything else on our agenda, is there? Nope.
Nope.
All righty. Well, then, thank you guys so much for everything. Thanks for all the input. Jason, if you're still on there, thank you so much for everything. You're awesome. You're a plethora of information.
Yes.
And,
good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
no, thank you.
Good speaking with all of you tonight.
Oh, thank you. All righty then. I guess at this point, then I guess we'll say meeting's adjourned then. Thank you all.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Bye.